Welcome to the third video in our four-part series on McKinsey's personal experience interview. In this one, I'm interviewing Alara, an ex-McKinsey consultant, about the connection dimension. This used to be called personal impact, but McKinsey updated the name in July 2025. Just like in a real-life PEI interview, I answered the standard question for this dimension, listened to her answer, and then followed up with a couple of clarifying questions. At the end, I'll share my feedback on both what worked well and where she could make her answer even stronger. Before we jump in, if you're preparing for your own PI interview and want personalized coaching, you can work with me directly. I've helped many candidates fine-tune their answers and land their McKinsey offers. I'll share the link to our coaching page below. Let's get started. Can you explain a challenging situation you encountered when you work with someone with an opposing opinion?
Oh, okay. I have one. So it was when I wrote my first book. And just to give you a context, I started writing a book in middle school that I eventually published by the time that I graduated. So I was 18 when I published it. It was written in Turkish. It was a mystery novel based on real events, but fictionalized. And the biggest challenge, I think, or one of the biggest challenges I experienced to date was through the process of editing that book to make it ready for being published. And a challenge that I experienced was when working with my editor directly. So, to give you an overview, my editor was a genius in his field, super passionate, did this because he loved to do it. But also with that came his interest in more, stylistically expressive pieces, literature that was a little bit more old-fashioned, classics. And so, he wasn't necessarily your pop culture type of guy, but he was really good at what he did. And it was a chance encounter that we ended up working together, but quite rewarding at the beginning until he, of course, started to not really appreciate the style that I was writing my book in, which for me, my intentions were to create a book, a young adult fiction that would be targeted towards the masses. So not necessarily a super literary piece, but something that, conveyed the ideas, was an easy read, quick read, and something that a lot of people could enjoy, but not make it the next big like J.R.R. Tolkien or anything like that. Of course, he did not like that idea, and he said that if he was writing a book, it had to be, a masterpiece. And so he would change everything that I'd send him and incorporate all these like long and verbose, like structured sentences that I, did not want. So I kindly tried to convey to him that that was not the style that I wanted to publish it in. But here is where the challenge existed. A, I'd paid him up front, so I had to continue working with him. B, I was a no-name author, and so finding an editor of that level and at the price range that I was willing to pay was difficult. C, because it was a passion project for him, anything I would say would demotivate him and prevent him from helping me. And then D, he had excellent connections to some of the largest publishing houses. And it's something to write a book, but it's also a whole nother thing to market it and actually get it accepted to be published. And so I needed his help. And I decided to overcome this challenge by incorporating his sentences into portions of the book so that he felt like he still had a touch in it, but it wasn't enough to change the storyline or the overall feel of it. So I think when you work with people in challenging situations, the most important thing is to understand what drives them. And this is also applicable for a team setting, and to be able to, I think, maneuver around their motivations so that you don't cut them from the project entirely and still can get, a lot of their help without necessarily making it exactly the way they want.
Okay, so tell me more about the results then. So
the results is we actually ended up getting it published at a top 5 publishing house, and it sold out in the first press. And he ended up helping me get into a few different book expos where we had like author, signing days and meet and greets. So it ended up pretty well. And looking back, honestly, I do think that he also had a point. So people change, viewpoints change, and as I get older, I do appreciate what he encouraged me to do.
So just looking back at this example, what was the most challenging thing for you to deal with? Was it more like an in-person confrontation that you had to do, or was it the fact that this was the first time that you've encountered somebody who had an opposing opinion that maybe didn't make sense for you, yet you still had to act on it, you still needed to make this work?
So there was two big challenges. The first one is, given that I wrote the book in Turkish, there are cultural dynamics that come into play when you're working with different people from different cultures. And one of those is the respect and authority that comes with age. I, at the time, was a 17-year-old girl working with a man in his mid-40s. And so you trying to dictate to someone what they need to do when they're already an expert in their field and they're older than you is challenging because culturally, it's not maybe the most appropriate thing to say. And then the other thing is, regardless of what you say, sometimes people don't do it or they don't even understand it. So it was being able to work around and re-explain myself in a way that I could help him understand my perspective, which worked out in the end. But
And lastly, could you give me some maybe more concrete examples where you carried the learnings from this experience and you just made your life better after that?
this experience really helped me when I was working with people from different cultures. And given where I was located geographically, I had a lot of international projects where I had to work with people from the Middle East or from Eastern Europe. I always reminded myself of, like, given the situation, when you tell someone to do something which is so pertinent in consulting, there's a very fine balance and there's a way of saying it. So whenever I would start a project, I would always try to understand the culture first, then the hierarchy, and then I would observe how people actually communicate within the office and try to simulate that and maybe emulate that a little bit when I was asking for things.
Okay, that's super clear. Thanks so much. Here's what stood out to me in her answer. What I really like about this example is that it's unique. Not many candidates talk about writing and publishing their own book, so it's memorable. A unique story can help the interviewer remember you. Oh yes, the book author. And that's an advantage in PI interviews. She also made it clear where the opposing opinion came from. Differences in style, cultural factors, and an age and experience gap with the editor. I also liked how she worked around it, adding some of his edits, so he still felt ownership while keeping the tone she wanted. That shows adaptability and the ability to maintain a good working relationship in a sensitive situation. Now, here are a few ways she could make the story even stronger. When following the 5-step PI approach, which are context, problem, action, results, and learnings, it's important to cover each step fully. Here she skipped the results at first and went straight from actions to learnings, so I had to ask a follow-up about what happened in the end. She could strengthen the action step by adding 2 or 3 specifics from her conversations with the editor. For example, what she said when he pushed back on her changes, how she got him to meet halfway, and how she kept things calm when the discussion became tense. These details would show her influencing skills and help bring a 6.5-minute answer closer to the recommended 10.